Millionaire returns in wheelchair pretending to be poor. Charles Mitchell had planned that moment for months, every detail carefully thought out. The engagement party for his only son was in full swing when he appeared at the entrance of the hall, unrecognizable in his wheelchair. It was then that Brandon, his son, approached with a face red with anger. The young businessman did not recognize his own father, who had disguised himself with dirty and torn clothes, unshaven beard, and unkempt hair. "Hey, what are you doing here?" shouted Brandon, pointing his finger at the man in the wheelchair. "This is a private party." Charles kept his gaze fixed on his son, feeling his heart tighten. All the guests stopped talking and looked in the direction of the commotion. The bride, Jessica, covered her face with her hands, embarrassed by the scene unfolding. "Please, young man, I just wanted a little food," said Charles with a choked voice. "I'm very hungry." "Food?" Brandon laughed with disdain. "You think you can come in here and ask for food as if it were a cheap diner? Security." Mrs. Martha, the family's housekeeper for over 20 years, was serving the guests when she heard the disturbance. Turning around, she almost dropped her tray. Her eyes widened as she recognized her employer, Charles Mitchell, disguised in that wheelchair. He had asked her not to tell anyone anything, promising to double her salary if she kept the secret. "Brandon, please lower your tone," whispered Jessica, pulling the groom by the arm. "Everyone is watching." "So what?" Brandon replied loudly. "I won't allow any bum to come here and ruin our special day." Charles watched every reaction, every word. For years he had dedicated himself to business, building a corporate empire, always believing his family was by his side. But in recent months, he began to notice strange comments. Conversations that stopped when he arrived forced smiles. The idea for the test had come when he overheard, by chance, his sister Elizabeth commenting to her husband about how good it would be if Charles disappeared from their lives once and for all. Those words had hurt him deeply. It was time to find out who really cared about him beyond the money. "Young man, I've known this family for many years," said Charles, still maintaining his act. "Couldn't I stay just for a little while?" "Known?" Brandon guffawed. "How could you know our family? You're a beggar." Elizabeth Mitchell, Charles's sister and the party's organizer, approached with a look of disgust. She wore an extremely expensive gold dress and jewelry that sparkled under the hall lights. Her husband, Kenneth, accompanied her with an irritated expression. "Brandon is right," said Elizabeth with an acid tone. "These people take advantage of any event to try and get handouts. It's outrageous." Charles felt a pang in his chest. His own sister was speaking of him as if he were trash. Kenneth, his brother-in-law, who had always been opportunistic and flattering, now looked at him with absolute contempt. "Ma'am, I'm not asking for a handout," said Charles with dignity. "I just wanted a plate of food. I can pay for it." "Pay?" laughed Kenneth. "With what money, you ragged man?" At that moment, one of the party's waiters, a young man named Tyler, approached discreetly. He had worked briefly at Charles's company years ago, and even though he didn't recognize his boss in disguise, was moved by the situation. "Excuse me," Tyler said quietly to Elizabeth. "May I offer a plate to the gentleman?" "Don't even think about it," shouted Elizabeth. "You are here to serve our guests, not any intruder." Tyler lowered his head, embarrassed, but made a discreet signal to Charles, indicating he would try to help later. This small gesture of kindness touched the disguised businessman's heart deeply. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. The tension in the room grew with each passing second. The guests, mostly business people and members of New York's high society, whispered among themselves, some recording the scene with their phones. Charles noticed Jessica's embarrassment. She seemed to be the only person with an ounce of compassion in the situation. "Brandon, just let the man stay," she asked softly. "He seems harmless." "Harmless?" Brandon exploded. "Jessica, you don't understand anything about these kinds of people. They start by asking for food, then they want money. Then they make up some story about being long-lost relatives or some other crazy tale." His son's words hit Charles like a punch to the gut. Long-lost relatives. If only his own son knew he was talking about exactly that. Mrs. Martha approached nervously, pretending to arrange appetizers on a nearby table, but actually wanting to stay close to intervene if necessary. She had known Charles for so long that she could see the pain in his eyes, even through all the disguise. "Please, Mr. Brandon," she said quietly, "don't you think you're overdoing it a bit?" "Mrs. Martha, stay out of this," Brandon retorted sharply. "Go back to the kitchen." The loyal housekeeper walked away with tears in her eyes. In over 20 years of working for that family, she had never been treated with such disrespect, and seeing her employer, a good man who had always treated her with dignity, being humiliated like that left her heartbroken. Charles decided to intensify the test. He needed to know just how far his own son's cruelty would go. "Young man, do you think I could use the restroom?" he asked with a trembling voice. "The restroom!" Brandon almost shouted. "Now you want to use our restroom too? What's next? You'll want to take a shower?" The malicious laughter of some guests echoed through the hall. Charles saw faces he had known for decades, people who had benefited from his generosity in business, now laughing at his humiliation. Jessica couldn't take it anymore. Even against her fiancé's wishes, she stepped forward. "Of course you can use the restroom, sir," she said kindly. "It's over there, down the hallway." "Jessica!" Brandon protested. "Brandon, enough!" she retorted for the first time. "A little humanity won't hurt anyone." Charles thanked her with a nod and steered his wheelchair in the direction she indicated. On the way, he heard whispered comments from the guests. "What an embarrassing situation. These people really have no limits. They should have stricter security." Upon reaching the bathroom, Charles locked the door and for a few moments removed part of his disguise, looking at himself in the mirror. Tears streamed down his face. The pain of seeing his own son treat him with such contempt was almost unbearable. It was then that he noticed something in the bathroom cabinet, his high blood pressure medication with his name on the prescription. The family truly believed he was out of town on business, as he had said. No one suspected he had returned specifically for this test. When he returned to the hall, the party had resumed its pace, but there were still curious glances directed at him. Elizabeth approached with a false expression of concern. "Look, my dear," she said in a condescending tone, "I understand your situation, but you need to understand that this isn't the appropriate place for you. Why don't you look for a social assistance center?" Charles looked her in the eyes. His own sister, who had grown up with him, played with him in childhood, was now treating him like an unwanted stranger. "Ma'am, may I ask you a question?" he said calmly. "You may," Elizabeth replied impatiently. "Do you have any siblings?" Elizabeth paused for a second, surprised by the question. "Yes, I do, a brother. I mean, he used to be. He is no longer with us." Charles felt the world spin. Had she said he was lost, that he was no longer with them? What exactly did that mean? "I'm sorry for your loss," he said, controlling his emotion. "It wasn't exactly a loss," Elizabeth replied coldly. "Sometimes people distance themselves from the family by choice. They prefer business over family." The words cut like razors. Charles understood that the family considered him a stranger, even before the disguise. The distance had begun a long time ago. He just hadn't noticed. Tyler, the kind waiter, took advantage of a distracted moment to discreetly approach with a small plate of appetizers. "Sir, I managed to save this for you," he whispered, offering the plate. "Thank you very much, my boy," said Charles sincerely. "What's your name?" "Tyler, sir." "Tyler, do you have family?" "Yes, I do. My mother is sick, so I work at various events to afford her medicine." Charles felt his heart warm. Here was someone who, even with his own difficulties, had compassion for a stranger. "Your mother is lucky to have a son like you," he said, moved. "Sir, may I ask, do you have family?" Charles looked around the hall, seeing Brandon chatting animatedly with guests, Elizabeth organizing party details, Kenneth drinking expensive champagne. "I thought I did," he replied sadly, "but I think I was mistaken." At that moment, an unexpected situation occurred. A small child, the daughter of one of the guests, slipped from her mother's hand and ran toward Charles's chair. It was Lily, just 5 years old, the daughter of one of the company's minority partners. "Hi, Grandpa Charles," the girl shouted cheerfully before anyone could stop her. The silence that followed was deafening. All nearby adults froze. The girl's mother, Rachel, rushed to get her, her face red with embarrassment. "Lily, come here," she said nervously. "Don't bother the gentleman." "But, Mommy, it's Grandpa Charles from the company," insisted the child innocently. "He always gives me chocolate when I go to the office with Daddy." Brandon quickly approached, hearing the commotion. "What is this child talking about?" he asked sharply. Rachel was visibly nervous. "Sorry, Brandon. Children sometimes confuse people. Lily, let's go." But the girl, with the typical honesty of her age, continued. "I'm not confused. It is Grandpa Charles. He just looks different. And why is he in that chair?" Charles's heart almost stopped. The child's innocence was about to destroy his entire plan. But at the same time, seeing that someone recognized him fondly moved him deeply. Brandon looked more closely at the man in the chair. For a brief moment, something familiar flickered in his eyes, but he shook his head, dismissing the possibility. "It's just a coincidence," he murmured. "This child must have seen a photo somewhere." Charles breathed a sigh of relief, but realized he needed to be more careful. He gently stroked the girl's hair. "Thank you, little one, but I think you've mistaken me for someone else," he said softly. The child's mother took the opportunity to carry her away, but not before Lily shouted once more, "Bye, Grandpa Charles. Get better soon from that chair." Elizabeth approached her brother-in-law, Kenneth, with a suspicious look. "Didn't you find what that child said strange?" she whispered. "Elizabeth, children say all sorts of things," replied Kenneth. "Besides, your brother is away on business. We got his email yesterday confirming he won't be back until next week." An email that Charles himself had sent as part of his plan. He had planned everything meticulously, including fake communications about his business trip to ensure no one would suspect his presence. The party continued, but now Charles noticed every detail with painful clarity. He saw how the guests behaved without the money man around. Conversations were freer, criticisms more open. He heard a group of nearby businessmen commenting, "Thank goodness Charles isn't here. That man is a bore, always controlling everything." It's true, the party got more relaxed without him. I hope the company passes to Brandon soon. At least the kid is less fussy. Each word was a stab in the back. People he considered friends, whom he had helped in business, who had benefited from his generosity over the years, now spoke of him with such contempt. Mrs. Martha passed by him serving more drinks and discreetly whispered, "Mr. Charles, you shouldn't be going through this. Do you want me to tell them who you are?" Charles shook his head. "No, Martha, I need to see how far this goes." "But, sir, this is hurting you. I can see it in your eyes." "Sometimes it's necessary to feel pain to see the truth," he replied philosophically. At that moment, Brandon approached again, this time with a glass of red wine in his hand. His face was redder, indicating he had already drunk too much. "Still here?" he said with a slightly slurred voice. "I thought you'd gotten the message." "Young man, I just wanted to stay a little longer," said Charles humbly. "The music is nice, the people seem happy." "Happy?" laughed Brandon sarcastically. "Of course we're happy. We're celebrating my engagement to the most wonderful woman in the world, far from boring people who only know how to ruin our fun." Boring people. Charles knew his son was referring to him, even without knowing. "And you're ruining it," continued Brandon. "You're embarrassing our guests with your presence." Then something happened that no one expected. Brandon, perhaps from the alcohol, perhaps from accumulated irritation, deliberately spilled the red wine on Charles's already dirty clothes. "Oops," he said with a cruel smile. "How careless of me." The red liquid ran down the faded blue shirt Charles was wearing as a disguise. Some guests chuckled softly, others were embarrassed. Jessica ran over to them with napkins. "Brandon, what kind of behavior is this?" she protested, helping to clean the man in the chair. "Relax, Jessica, it was just an accident," said Brandon, but his tone made it clear it was not accidental. Charles looked at his stained clothes and then at his son. The humiliation was complete. His own flesh and blood, the person he loved most in the world, had treated him like trash. "Thank you, Ma'am," he said to Jessica, who kept trying to help him with the napkins. You have a kind heart." "No need to thank me," she replied kindly. "Anyone would do the same." "Unfortunately, that's not true," said Charles, looking around. "Kindness is rarer than it should be." Jessica paused for a moment, looking into the man's eyes. There was something in that gaze that touched her deeply, a sadness that seemed to go far beyond the current situation. "Are you all right?" she asked with sincere concern. "I'm better now," replied Charles. "Your kindness has given me strength." At this moment, Elizabeth decided to intervene definitively. "Enough," she said loudly, drawing everyone's attention. "This has gone too far. I'm calling the building security to remove this man." "No need, Elizabeth," said a firm voice behind her. Everyone turned. It was Dr. Stephen, the family's private physician for 15 years, who had just arrived at the party. He looked directly at Charles and his eyes widened in recognition. "Charles," he whispered, incredulous. Charles's heart raced. He had been discovered. "Doctor, I think you're confusing this man with someone else," Elizabeth said quickly. Dr. Stephen approached the wheelchair, examining the disguised face more closely. "No, I'm not confused," he said with certainty. "This has been my patient for 15 years. Charles Mitchell." The silence that followed was absolute. All the guests stopped talking. Brandon dropped the glass he was holding, which shattered on the marble floor with a noise that echoed through the hall. "What? What are you saying?" stammered Elizabeth, her face pale. "I'm saying that this man you are humiliating is Charles Mitchell," said Dr. Stephen loudly for all to hear. "The owner of this company, the groom's father, the brother of the hostess of this party." Brandon staggered back as if he had been punched. "No, it can't be. My father is traveling." Charles finally spoke, now without completely disguising his voice. "No, my son. I am here, and I saw everything." The words came out with a deep pain that cut the air like a blade. Brandon fell to his knees beside the chair, his face distraught. Father, I didn't know." "I know you didn't know who I was," said Charles calmly. "But you knew I was a human being. And yet you chose to treat me like trash." Elizabeth approached trembling, her face bewildered. "Charles, brother, why did you do this to us?" "Because I needed to know," he replied, tears streaming down his face. "I needed to know if you loved me or just my money." Jessica covered her face with her hands, understanding the magnitude of what she had witnessed. All the guests whispered among themselves, some beginning to discreetly step away, embarrassed to have participated in the humiliation. "Father, forgive me," cried Brandon. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." "Brandon," said Charles in a tired voice, "you didn't recognize me, that's true. But the way you treated a helpless man in a wheelchair showed who you really are." Tyler, the kind waiter, watched from afar with wide eyes. He had been kind to one of the country's richest men without knowing it, moved only by compassion. Mrs. Martha approached crying, no longer able to keep the secret. "Mr. Charles, I wanted to, but you asked me not to." "You did right, Martha," he said softly. "You were the only one who remained faithful, even knowing the truth." The revelation spread like fire through the hall. Guests who moments before were laughing at the situation now approached trying to greet Charles with forced smiles and words of apology. "Charles, what a surprise," said a businessman who moments earlier had commented on how the party was better without him. "I didn't know you had returned from your trip," said another, trying to sound natural. Charles looked at them one by one, seeing the falseness stamped on each face. "Trip?" he said ironically. "What trip is that? I've been here the whole time. You were talking about me just minutes ago, remember?" The embarrassment was palpable. People who for decades had been part of Charles's social circle now didn't know where to hide their faces. Kenneth, the self-serving brother-in-law, approached with a forced smile. "Charles, brother-in-law, you've always been a joker. What a fantastic performance. We almost believed it." "Performance?" repeated Charles bitterly. "It wasn't a performance, Kenneth. It was a test, and you all failed." Elizabeth tried to justify herself. "Brother, if I had known it was you, if you had known it was me, you would have treated me differently," Charles finished. "But not because I'm your brother. Because I'm rich. That's it, isn't it? She lowered her head with no answer. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing, Jessica approached Brandon, who was still on his knees beside his father's chair. Brandon, get up, she said softly. You need to talk to your father. How can I talk? Sobbed Brandon. How can I look him in the eye after what I did? Charles observed his son's despair. Part of him felt compassion for the pain he saw, but another part was still too wounded to forgive. Brandon, he finally said, stand up. The young man obeyed, wiping his tears with the back of his hand. Dad, Let me speak first, interrupted Charles. For years, I worked to build all of this. I thought I was building a legacy for you, for our family. But today I discovered I only built wealth. I didn't build character. Dad, please. You poured wine on me on purpose, continued Charles. Not because I had done something wrong, but because you thought I was beneath you. Because you think I was poor. Brandon couldn't respond. His father's words were truths too painful to contest. And you, Elizabeth, said Charles, turning to his sister. You said I was no longer among you, as if I had disappeared from the family by choice. Charles, I didn't mean that. Yes, you did. Because that's how you feel. You tolerate my presence because of the money, not because you love me. The party had turned into a reckoning. The guests didn't know whether to stay or leave. The mood was too heavy for celebration. Dr. Stephen approached Charles with medical concern. Charles, are you all right? Do you need any medication? Thank you, doctor. I'm physically fine. Emotionally, well, that will take time to heal. The doctor helped Charles adjust better in the wheelchair. May I ask why the chair? You don't have mobility issues. It's part of the test, explained Charles. I wanted to see how people treat someone who appears vulnerable and poor. And what did you discover? Charles looked around the hall, seeing embarrassed faces, averted gazes, people trying to slip away discreetly. I discovered that kindness is rarer than I imagined, he said sadly. But I also discovered that it exists. Tyler, that waiter over there, was kind to me without knowing who I was. Jessica also showed compassion. Mrs. Martha kept my confidence even while suffering to see my humiliation. Tyler, hearing his name, approached timidly. Sir, I didn't know. I'm sorry I didn't do more. You did enough, said Charles kindly. You showed me there is still kindness in the world. At that moment, a new twist happened. Rachel, the mother of the girl, Lily, approached nervously. Mr. Charles, I need to tell you something. Everyone looked at her. Lily wasn't confusing you with anyone, she said in a trembling voice. She really knows you. My husband is David, from the Boston branch. Lily always sees you when we go to company events. I remember her, said Charles with a sad smile. A lovely girl. What I mean is, she recognized you even in disguise, because children see with the heart, not with the eyes, continued Rachel, and when she shouted your name, I was afraid. Afraid that someone would think we were on the side of the beggar and judge us poorly. Rachel's confession hit everyone like a punch. She had recognized Charles through the child, but chose to deny it to avoid social compromise. So you knew who I was? Asked Charles. I suspected, and I hate myself for not having the courage to defend you, she said, crying. Mr. Charles, I am a coward. At least you admit it, said Charles. That's already more honest than many here have done. Elizabeth tried once more to approach her brother. Charles, brother, can we speak in private? Why in private? He asked. Everything you had to say to me, you said in front of everyone. Why not hear my answer the same way? Please, brother. Elizabeth, for years you pretended to love me. You pretended concern when I was sick, pretended joy when I succeeded in business. But today I discovered it was all a lie. It wasn't a lie. Yes, it was. You said I prefer business to family. But the truth is you all prefer my money to me. Brandon, who had remained silent for a few minutes, finally found the courage to speak. Father, I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness. I know what I did was unforgivable. But you need to know that I love you. Even having acted like a monster today, I love you." Charles stared intently into his son's eyes. "Brandon, do you know what part hurt me the most?" "No, sir." "It wasn't you not recognizing me. It was you taking pleasure in humiliating me. You smiled when you spilled the wine on me. You enjoyed my suffering." "Father." "That shows a cruelty I didn't know existed in you," continued Charles, "and it makes me question if I failed as a father." Jessica, who had observed everything in silence for a few minutes, finally spoke up. "Mr. Charles, may I speak?" "Of course, my dear." "I also sinned today," she said sincerely. "When Brandon started treating you poorly, I should have defended you more. I should have insisted that he stop. But I was afraid of causing more trouble at our engagement." "Jessica, no," protested Brandon. "Let me speak, Brandon," she said firmly. "Mr. Charles, you taught me a lesson today. You showed that it's not enough to not do wrong. We need to have the courage to stop wrong when we see it happening." Charles was impressed by the young woman's maturity and honesty. "Jessica, you were the only person here who showed compassion, even without knowing who I was. That says a lot about your character. But it wasn't enough," she said, "and now I need to make a difficult decision." She turned to Brandon, taking the engagement ring off her finger. "Brandon, I love you, but I cannot marry someone capable of such cruelty, not like this." "Jessica, no!" shouted Brandon. "Please don't do this." "It's the only right thing to do," she said, handing over the ring. "If you truly change, if you truly learn something from this, perhaps in the future, but now I cannot." Jessica's decision caused more commotion in the hall. Some guests whispered comments, others began to discreetly leave. Charles observed the scene with conflicting feelings. On one hand, he was happy to see that Jessica had principles. On the other, it pained him to see his son suffering even after everything. "Jessica," he said, "you don't have to do this because of me." "It's not because of you, sir," she replied. "It's for my own conscience. I cannot pretend I didn't see what I saw." At that moment, something unexpected happened. Lily, the 5-year-old girl, managed to escape from her mother again and ran to Charles. "Grandpa Charles," she shouted, climbing onto his lap in the wheelchair. "Why is everyone sad?" The child's innocence brought a moment of relief to the tension in the room. Charles hugged the girl, feeling a bit of genuine human warmth. "Sometimes adults do things that make them sad, little one," he said affectionately. "But you don't have to stay in the chair now, right?" asked Lily. "Can you get up already?" The innocent question made everyone realize that Charles had no real physical problem. The chair was just part of the disguise. "Yes, little one, I can get up," he said, and slowly rose from the chair. Seeing Charles standing there, even with stained clothes and disheveled hair, reaffirmed his identity to everyone present. There was no more doubt. Elizabeth approached once more. "Brother, now that everything is cleared up, can we forget this and be a family again?" Elizabeth's question showed she still hadn't grasped the gravity of the situation. "Forget," repeated Charles, incredulous. "Elizabeth, do you think I can simply forget that I discovered my family despises me?" "We don't despise you." "Yes, you do. You despise who I am when I have no power over you. You despise my presence when you think it interferes with your plans." Kenneth tried to intervene. "Charles, I think you're misinterpreting." "Am I?" interrupted Charles. "You laughed when you thought I was a beggar. You humiliated me, denied me food, water, even the use of the bathroom, and you did it with pleasure." "But we didn't know it was you," insisted Kenneth. "Exactly," exploded Charles. "You didn't know it was me, and yet you were cruel. That shows you are cruel by nature, not by circumstance." The logic was irrefutable. There was no denying that everyone's behavior had been revealing of their true characters. Dr. Stephen approached again. "Charles, perhaps we should leave. You've been through a lot of stress today." "Doctor, I'm not finished yet," said Charles. "I have some important things to say." He looked around the hall, seeing the tense faces of family and guests. "I want everyone to know that during this party I filmed everything," he said calmly. "Filmed?" asked Brandon, alarmed. "Yes, the wheelchair had hidden cameras, Every insult, every malicious laugh, every cruel gesture was recorded. Panic spread among the guests. Many had said compromising things, thinking they were merely humiliating a beggar. "Charles, you're not going to—" began Elizabeth. "Use it against you," he completed. "No, I'm not cruel like you, but I will keep it as a reminder, to never forget who truly cares about me." Tyler approached timidly. "Sir, may I speak?" "Of course, Tyler. You said you filmed everything. Does that mean you also filmed the people who were good to you?" "Yes," smiled Charles. "I filmed your kindness, Tyler. I filmed Jessica's compassion. I filmed Mrs. Martha's loyalty." "And what will you do with those recordings?" "I will remember that there is still kindness in the world," replied Charles, moved. "And I will reward that kindness." He turned to Tyler. "Tyler, you said you work several jobs to pay for your mother's medicine?" "Yes, sir." "Starting tomorrow, you won't have to worry about that anymore. I want to offer you a permanent position at my company, with a salary sufficient to care for your mother and still have enough left for yourself." Tyler began to cry. "Sir, I can't accept." "You can, and you will accept," said Charles firmly. "Kindness deserves to be rewarded." He turned to Mrs. Martha. "Martha, you kept my trust even while seeing my suffering. That shows rare loyalty." "Mr. Charles, I only did what was right. And for doing what was right, you will be rewarded. I will double your salary and set up a retirement fund for you." Mrs. Martha couldn't stop crying from emotion and gratitude. Charles then turned to Jessica. "Jessica, you showed more character in one night than many people show in a lifetime." "Mr. Charles, you had the courage to do what was right, even when it cost you dearly, even losing your engagement." Jessica lowered her head, still emotionally shaken by her decision to break up with Brandon. "If in the future you decide to give my son a second chance," continued Charles, "know that you will have my full support, but only if he proves he has truly changed." Brandon looked at his father with a mix of hope and despair. "Dad, what do I need to do to deserve your forgiveness?" Charles Mitchell thought for a long moment before answering. "Brandon, forgiveness isn't asked for. Forgiveness is earned, and it's not earned with words. Tell me what to do." "Anything." "Do you really want to know?" asked Charles seriously. "Yes, sir." "You will work for 1 year as a volunteer caring for people in vulnerable situations. You will discover firsthand what it means to be treated with contempt for being poor. You will learn humility and compassion." "I accept," said Brandon immediately. "Don't be so quick to accept," warned Charles. "It will be a full year. No salary, no perks, no privileges. You will clean, feed, care for people who are exactly as I was today." "I accept," repeated Brandon, this time with more conviction. "And you, Elizabeth?" asked Charles, turning to his sister. "Brother, what do you want from me?" "I want you to reflect on whether you truly consider me your brother or just a source of money." "Charles, you are my brother." "Then why did you say I was no longer among you? Why did you organize this party celebrating my absence?" Elizabeth didn't know what to say. The truth was, she had indeed felt relieved by her brother's supposed trip, because she could organize the party the way she wanted, without his interferences. I only meant—" "Elizabeth, you have 2 options," interrupted Charles. "Either admit that you see me only as a bank account, and we can at least be honest with each other, or prove that you love me as a brother regardless of the money." "How can I prove it?" "The same way I asked Brandon, by working with people in need, learning the value of humility." Elizabeth looked at Kenneth, who shook his head negatively. It was obvious she wouldn't take the challenge. "Charles, that's too radical," she said. "Is it?" he replied. "Is it more radical than humiliating a defenseless man in a wheelchair?" She didn't answer. "I'll interpret your silence as an answer," said Charles sadly. "You chose pride over fraternal love." "Charles, don't be unfair." "Unfair? I offered a chance for redemption. You chose to refuse. The unfairness lies in your choices, not in my consequences." At that moment, more guests began to discreetly leave the party. The situation had become too awkward to continue. Charles watched the people leaving and commented, See how people flee when the truth appears. When it was time to laugh at the beggar, everyone stayed. When it's time to face their consciences, everyone leaves. Rachel, Lily's mother, approached. "Mr. Mitchell, I would like to apologize once again, and I would like to accept any consequences for my actions." "Rachel, your daughter recognized me because you are good people. A child only recognizes kindness in those who live with kindness. But I was cowardly. You were, but you admit it. And that is already the first step toward change," said Charles. "Besides, your daughter Lily gave me one of the purest moments of this evening. She called me Grandpa with genuine affection." Lily, who was still nearby, ran to Charles again. "Grandpa Charles, are you leaving?" "Yes, I am, little one. When are you coming back?" Charles looked around the hall, seeing his family shattered. His son's engagement party turned into a settling of scores. "I don't know, Lily. It might take a while. But do you promise you'll come back?" The child's sincerity touched Charles's heart deeply. Here was someone who loved him without interest, without calculation, without ulterior motives. "I promise I will always be available for you, little one," he said, hugging the girl. Dr. Stephen approached. "Charles, you need to go home and rest. It's been a very intense night." "Doctor, before I go, I need to do one more thing." Charles Mitchell walked to the center of the hall and spoke loudly. "I want everyone still here to listen carefully to what I'm about to say." The remaining guests stopped whispering and paid attention. "Today I discovered who my true friends are, and who are merely opportunists. This discovery, though painful, was necessary." "Charles," one of the businessmen present tried to interrupt. "Let me finish," said Charles firmly. "From today on, my business, my friendships, and my family relationships will be based on truth, not convenience." He looked specifically at some businessmen who had made malicious comments during the party. "Those who laughed at my humiliation need to know that they witnessed their own character, not mine." The embarrassment was visible on the faces of those alluded to, and those who showed kindness will be remembered forever. Tyler was moved again upon hearing the words. Charles then addressed Brandon specifically. "My son, you have 1 week to decide if you truly want to try to redeem yourself. If you decide you do, come find me. If you decide you don't, I will respect your choice, but our relationship will never be the same." "Father, I've already decided." "I want to try." 1 week to think," insisted Charles, "because once you begin, there's no turning back. You will discover what it truly means to be scorned by society." Brandon nodded, understanding the seriousness of the proposal. Charles turned to Elizabeth. "Elizabeth, you also have a week to decide if you want a brother or just a banker." "Charles, please." 1 week, he repeated. "After that, we will treat our relationship according to your choice." He then headed for the exit, but before leaving completely, he turned once more. "To those who filmed my humiliation with their cell phones thinking it was funny, know that you filmed your own shame. To those who had compassion, you filmed your own honor." Dr. Stephen accompanied him to the exit. Mrs. Martha also approached. "Mr. Charles, may I accompany you?" "Of course, Martha. You have always been welcome in my company." Tyler ran after them. "Sir, how do I go about contacting you to accept the job?" Charles smiled, the first genuine smile of the night. "Tyler, come by the office tomorrow morning. Ask for me at the reception." "But, sir, what if they think I'm an opportunist? Say that Charles Mitchell himself asked you to come find him, and say it was for your kindness to a man in a wheelchair." When they left the hall, Charles heard the commotion he had left behind. Nervous conversations, attempts at justification, people trying to understand what had happened. In the elevator, Dr. Stephen asked, "Charles, do you think you were too harsh with them?" "Doctor, for years I tolerated falsehoods because I wanted to believe I was loved. Today I discovered it wasn't love. It was self-interest. Being harsh with lies is the only way to give value to truth." "And do you think your son will accept the challenge?" "I don't know," Charles answered honestly. "But if he accepts, he will become a better man. If he doesn't, at least I will know where he chose to be." Mrs. Martha, who had remained silent, finally spoke. "Mr. Charles, may I say something?" "Of course, Martha." "In 20 years working for your family, I have never seen you so sad, but I have also never seen you so strong. Why do you say that? Because today you had the courage to see the truth, even though it hurt, and you had the courage to act according to that truth. Charles reflected on the words of the loyal housekeeper. She was right. It had been one of the most painful nights of his life, but also one of the most revealing. When they reached the garage, Charles dismissed the driver and decided to drive himself. "Sir, is it safe for you to drive?" asked Dr. Stephen. "Doctor, today I have seen more clearly than I have in years." "Yes, I'm sure." On the way home, Charles reflected on everything that had happened. The pain was still alive in his chest, but there was also a strange sense of relief. He finally knew where he stood. Upon arriving home, a 3-story mansion in an upscale New York neighborhood, Charles felt strange. That house had always represented success, achievement, pride. Now it represented loneliness. Mrs. Martha accompanied him to the entrance. "Sir, would you like me to prepare something for you to eat?" "No need, Martha. You've already done a lot today. You can go rest." "Mr. Charles," she said before walking away, "may I say one last thing?" "Of course." "You did the right thing today. I know it hurts, but it was right." Alone in his mansion, Charles went up to his office on the 2nd floor. He sat in the leather armchair from which he commanded his business and looked out the windows at the illuminated city. He picked up the phone and called his personal lawyer. "Dr. Robert, it's Charles. I know it's late, but I need to schedule an urgent meeting for tomorrow morning." "Of course, Charles. Did something happen?" "Let's just say I need to make some adjustments to my will." "I understand. 8 in the morning at the office is good." "Perfect." After hanging up, Charles went to his room. He looked at himself in the mirror and saw a tired man, but one with a clear conscience. He had discovered painful truths, but he preferred the pain of truth to the comfort of illusion. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot who are just starting out. Now continuing. That night, Charles slept better than he had in months. Not because he was happy, but because he was finally at peace with reality. The next morning he woke up early and went straight to the lawyer's office. Dr. Robert Thompson was a serious, middle-aged man who had handled the Mitchell family's legal affairs for over 10 years. "Charles, you seem different," observed the lawyer. "Did something happen?" "Robert, can I trust you to keep absolute confidentiality about what I'm going to tell you?" "Of course, professional secrecy." Charles then recounted in detail everything that had happened at the engagement party. The lawyer listened without interrupting, with expressions ranging from surprise to indignation. "My God, Charles, what a terrible situation," said Robert when he finished the account. "Terrible, but necessary," replied Charles. "And now I need to make some important legal decisions." "What kind of decisions?" "I want to change my will. I want to create clauses that ensure my inheritance goes only to people who demonstrate character, not just kinship." Dr. Robert picked up a notepad and began to write. "Specifically, what do you have in mind?" "First, Brandon will only inherit if he completes 1 year of verified volunteer work at charitable institutions, and even then, he will only inherit a portion." "What kind of volunteer work?" "Caring for people in vulnerable situations, the elderly, the disabled, the homeless. I want him to learn firsthand what it means to be despised by society." "And what about your sister Elizabeth?" "Elizabeth will have the same challenge, 1 year of volunteer work. If she accepts and completes it, she keeps her share of the inheritance. If she refuses, she gets only a symbolic amount." "And if neither of them accepts?" "The majority of the inheritance will be divided between charitable institutions and people who have demonstrated genuine character. Tyler, the waiter who was kind to me, will receive a substantial amount. Mrs. Martha will also be very well provided for." Dr. Robert continued writing. "Charles, these are very drastic decisions, are you sure?" "Robert, for years I built wealth thinking about leaving a legacy for my family. But I've discovered that without character, wealth is just misused money. And what if they meet the conditions but then go back to how they were before? That's why I created a second condition. After inheriting, they must continue contributing annually to social work. If they stop, the inheritance is transferred to charitable institutions. The lawyer stopped writing and looked seriously at Charles. Do you realize this could create a lot of family conflict? Robert, the conflict already exists. I just stopped pretending I didn't see it. And do you think this probation system is fair? Is it fairer than leaving a fortune in the hands of people who will misuse the money? Is it fairer than rewarding cruelty and selfishness? Dr. Robert reflected for a moment. You have a point. It's your decision. There's one more thing, continued Charles. I want to create a special fund to reward acts of kindness. People like Tyler, who show compassion without expecting anything in return. How would that work? Employees of mine and other companies who stand out for kindness and character will receive special bonuses. I want to fund studies, medical treatments, personal projects for people who prove their human worth. That's very interesting, Charles. It's like a character award. Exactly. If we reward financial performance, why not reward human performance? They spent the next 2 hours working out the legal details of the changes to the will. When they finished, Dr. Robert made one final observation. Charles, you've created a will that forces people to become better to inherit. It's brilliant, but it's also a risk. What kind of risk? The risk that they'll do the volunteer work just to inherit, not from a genuine change of character. That's why I included the continuity clause. They'll have to maintain the character for the rest of their lives, not just for a year. And what if it's still pretense? Robert, if someone pretends to be kind for decades to keep an inheritance, in the end, what difference does it make? The practical result will be the same. Acts of kindness happening. The lawyer laughed at Charles's logic. You're right. In the end, what matters are the actions, not the motivations behind them. When he left the lawyer's office, Charles felt lighter. He had made decisions that would protect his fortune from being misused and at the same time create incentives for people to become better. Back at his corporate office, Charles found Tyler waiting in the reception, visibly nervous. Good morning, Tyler, greeted Charles warmly. Good morning, sir. I'm not sure what to say about last night. You don't need to say anything. Your kindness spoke for itself. Charles led him to his private office, ignoring the curious looks from employees who didn't understand why a waiter was being received by the CEO. Tyler, you said you work several events to pay for your mother's medicine. Tell me more about that. My mother has diabetes and high blood pressure, sir. The medicines are expensive and she needs constant medical follow-up. My regular salary doesn't cover everything, so I work events on weekends. How long have you been doing this? 3 years, sir. Ever since my father left us. Charles noticed Tyler's difficulty in talking about his father and didn't press the matter. Tyler, I want to offer you a job here at the company. Fixed salary, health plan that will cover all your mother's treatments, and there will still be enough left for you to study. Sir, that's too generous. It's not generosity, Tyler, it's recognition. You showed me yesterday that kindness still exists in the world. But, sir, I don't have a college degree. You have something more important, character. The rest we can teach. Tyler began to cry, unable to believe the change his life was taking. Mr. Mitchell, how can I thank you? By continuing to be the kind person you already are, replied Charles, and helping me identify other people like you within the company. How so? I want to create a program where we reward employees who demonstrate kindness and solidarity. You will help me coordinate this. Sir, but I've never coordinated anything. Tyler, you coordinated your family when your father abandoned you. You coordinate multiple jobs to care for your mother. You have more experience coordinating what matters than many executives. The conversation was interrupted when Charles's secretary announced over the intercom, Mr. Charles, your son Brandon is here. He says he needs to speak with you urgently. Charles looked at Tyler. Can you wait in the meeting room next door? We'll continue our conversation in a few minutes. Of course, sir. When Tyler left, Brandon entered the room looking worn out. His clothes were rumpled, his red eyes indicated a sleepless night. Father, I thought all night about what you said. And did you reach any conclusion? I did. I want to accept the challenge. I want to work as a volunteer. Charles studied his son's face, searching for signs of sincerity. Brandon, it wasn't just one night. Are you sure you've reflected enough? Father, I spent the whole night remembering every moment of the party. I saw how I treated that man. I mean, how I treated you. I saw the cruelty in my actions, and I realized I don't know the man I've become. Go on. I want to discover who I really am beneath all this privilege and arrogance. I want to learn to have real compassion. Brandon, this won't be easy. You'll be caring for people society looks down on. You'll clean, feed, bathe people others consider inferior. Are you prepared for that? I don't know if I'm prepared, Father, but I know I need to try. Charles remained silent for a long moment, analyzing his son's words. Where do you want to work? I thought about that too. I want to work at the St. Vincent nursing home in the outskirts. It's where the elderly who have no family, those who are abandoned, are. Charles was surprised by the specific choice. Why specifically there? Because last night when I treated you like a nuisance, I realized that's exactly how I saw the elderly, as people who were in the way, who were a burden. I want to learn to see them as human beings worthy of respect. Brandon's answer touched Charles deeply. His son had truly reflected on his attitudes. And Jessica, have you talked to her? I tried calling, but she didn't answer. I sent a message saying I was going to accept your challenge, but she replied that she needs time. Brandon, do you understand you might lose her for good? I understand, Father, and if it happens, it will be a consequence of my own choices. But I can't try to win her back without first becoming someone worthy of her love. Charles was impressed by the maturity in his son's words. When do you want to start? Today, if possible. Brandon, are you sure? Once you start, you can't quit halfway. A full year. I'm sure, Father. Charles picked up the phone and called the St. Vincent nursing home. He spoke with the director, Sister Margaret, a 60-year-old nun who had dedicated her life to caring for abandoned elderly. Sister Margaret, this is Charles Mitchell. I have a proposal for you. Hello, Mr. Charles. What a surprise. How can I help you? Actually, I'd like to help you. I have a young man who would like to work as a volunteer there at the nursing home. A full year. How wonderful. We always need help. What's his experience? None, and that's exactly why he needs to work there. Sister Margaret laughed on the other end of the line. I see. It's one of those character correction cases? Something like that, but I assure you he is sincerely willing to learn. Mr. Charles, I accept the young man, but on one condition. What? He will be treated like any other volunteer. No privileges, no special treatment. He'll clean, give baths, change diapers, spoon feed. Are you prepared for that? Charles looked at Brandon, who had overheard the conversation. He says yes, and I believe him. Great. He can come this afternoon and we'll start the training. When Charles hung up, Brandon asked, Dad, can I ask you a question? Of course. Why are you giving me this chance, after everything I did? Charles thought carefully before answering. Because last night, in the middle of all that cruelty, I saw a moment of genuine remorse in your eyes. When you realized who I was, the pain I felt wasn't just from being discovered. It was pain from having hurt someone. That's true, Dad. And because, despite everything, you are still my son, and I still have hope that there is goodness in you, buried under years of privilege and being spoiled. Brandon stood up and hesitantly approached his father. Dad, can I hug you? Charles hesitated for a moment, still feeling the sting of the previous night's humiliations. But then he opened his arms. The hug was long and emotional. Father and son cried together, one silently asking for forgiveness, the other offering a chance at redemption. When they separated, Charles said, Brandon, I will follow your progress at the nursing home, not to monitor you, but to support you. Thank you, Dad. And Brandon, if during this year you truly change, if you truly learn compassion, I will be proud to call you my son again. And if I can't, then at least we'll both know we tried. Brandon nodded, understanding the seriousness of the commitment he was making. Dad, can I ask one last thing? Sure. Are you going to tell Jessica about what I'm going to do? No. If she wants to know about you, she'll have to ask directly. Your actions will speak for you, not my words. I understand. That's fair. After Brandon left to get ready to start at the nursing home, Charles called Tyler back to his office. Sorry for the interruption, Tyler. Where were we? You were talking about the program to recognize kind employees. That's right. Tyler, I want you to be my special consultant to identify people like you within the company. But sir, how will I identify kindness? The same way I identified yours, by observing how people treat those who can offer them nothing in return. Tyler reflected on the answer. You want me to observe how employees treat the cleaning staff, the security guards, the cafeteria servers? Exactly, exclaimed Charles. You understood perfectly. And then? Then you'll report your observations to me, and we'll create ways to recognize and reward those people. Mr. Mitchell, can I make a suggestion? Of course. What if we also create a program where employees can nominate colleagues who help them in difficult times? Sometimes kindness happens in private. Charles was impressed with Tyler's insight. Excellent idea. We'll implement that too. They spent the morning working out the details of the program. Tyler showed a deep understanding of human nature and workplace dynamics that surprised Charles. By late morning, Charles made a decision. Tyler, I want you to be my special assistant for the company's social programs. Special assistant? Tyler's eyes widened. Yes. You'll have your own office, a secretary, and a budget to implement social responsibility projects. Sir, I don't know if I deserve that much responsibility. Tyler, yesterday you gave me food when I was hungry, not knowing who I was. That tells me you have more social responsibility than many executives. Tyler was moved again. Sir, can I tell my mother about these changes? Of course. And Tyler, I want to meet your mother. How about we have lunch together tomorrow, the three of us? Sir, she's going to be very nervous. Why would she be nervous? Because she never imagined her son would work directly with Charles Mitchell. Tyler, tell your mother that Charles Mitchell feels honored to work with her son. The phrase moved Tyler once again. He was beginning to understand that he had found not just a job, but a mentor who valued character above all else. During lunch, Charles reflected on the changes a single day had brought to his life. He had discovered painful truths about his family, but he had also found genuinely good people like Tyler. In the afternoon, he received an unexpected call. It was Jessica. Mr. Charles, it's Jessica. Hi, Jessica. How are you feeling? Confused, sad, but also relieved. Sir, can I ask a question? Of course. Why did you do that yesterday? Why did you disguise yourself? Charles patiently explained his motivations, the suspicions he had about the family, the need to discover the truth. I understand, said Jessica when he finished. Mr. Charles, I wanted to apologize once again for not defending you more energetically. Jessica, you were the only person who showed compassion. You don't need to apologize. Even so, I feel I could have done more. And you did more. You broke off the engagement when you saw the cruelty. That shows admirable character. Mr. Charles, can I ask one more question? As many as you want. Do you think Brandon can really change? Charles paused, thinking carefully about his answer. Jessica, honestly, I don't know, but he is willing to try, and that's already more than I expected 24 hours ago. He sent me a message saying he's going to work at a nursing home. Yes, he is, for a full year, taking care of abandoned elderly people. And do you believe he'll manage it? I believe he will try. Whether he succeeds or not depends on how much he really wants to change. Jessica was silent for a few seconds. Mr. Charles, would you be upset if I gave him a chance after this year? Upset? Laughed Charles. Jessica, I'd be happy. You are exactly the kind of person my son needs by his side, someone with character. Thank you, sir. That means a lot to me. But Jessica, don't feel pressured to get back with him. Only do it if you truly believe he has changed. I'll follow my heart, sir. That's the wisest thing you can do. After the call with Jessica, Charles felt more hopeful. Perhaps there was a real chance to rebuild his family on more solid foundations. Late in the afternoon, he received another call, this time from Elizabeth. Charles, brother, can we talk? Of course, Elizabeth. What have you decided? Decided? About what? About the volunteer work I suggested as a condition for our reconciliation. Elizabeth was silent for a moment. Charles, isn't that a bit excessive? Elizabeth, yesterday you treated me like human garbage. Don't you think you need to prove that doesn't reflect who you really are? But brother, volunteer work, it's not really my profile. What is your profile, Elizabeth? Humiliating defenseless people in wheelchairs? Charles, you're being unfair. Am I? Yesterday I asked for food and you said I was taking advantage. I asked to use the bathroom and you treated me like an intruder. How is that fair? Elizabeth had no answer. Elizabeth, you have two options. Prove you are capable of kindness through actions, or admit you prefer to keep your pride over having a brother. Can't there be a third option? What would that be? We simply forget what happened and go back to being siblings like before? How were we before, Elizabeth? You speaking ill of me behind my back and pretending to love me to my face. I didn't speak ill of you. You told Kenneth it would be good if I disappeared from your lives for good. Have you forgotten? Elizabeth was left without a response again. I heard you, Elizabeth, and that's when I decided to take the test. Charles, I only said that because sometimes you're so controlling, and your solution is to wish me out of your lives? That's not exactly what I meant. Elizabeth, you have 3 days to decide. Either you accept working as a volunteer for a year, proving you have compassion for the less fortunate, or our relationship remains strictly formal and businesslike. 3 days? Why 3 days? Because I already gave Brandon a week, and he decided in a few hours. If you need more time, it's because you have no real interest in redeeming yourself. And if I accept? If you accept and complete the year, we will be true siblings again. And if I don't accept? Then you will be choosing your pride over fraternal love. Elizabeth hung up without saying goodbye. Charles interpreted that as an answer in itself. That night, dining alone in his mansion, Charles reflected on the last 48 hours. His life had completely changed. He had lost illusions about his family, but gained clarity about who truly cared for him. Mrs. Martha approached while serving dinner. Mr. Charles, may I say you look better today? It's true, Martha. Even with all of yesterday's pain, I feel lighter today. Why do you think that is? Because I stopped pretending I didn't see the obvious. The truth, even if painful, is less burdensome than a lie. And your children? Do you think they will manage to change? Brandon is trying. Elizabeth is still deciding if she wants to try. Either way, I gave them both the opportunity. And if neither of them succeeds, then at least I'll know I tried to give a second chance. And I'll know that my fortune will go to people who truly deserve it. Mrs. Martha smiled. You're creating a different legacy, aren't you? How so? Instead of just leaving money, you're trying to leave better people. Charles had never thought of it that way, but he realized she was right. Martha, you have a wisdom that many intellectuals lack. Sir, one learns a lot by observing life, and I've observed many wealthy families over the years. And what have you observed? That money without character corrupts, but money with character can work miracles. And do you think I'm on the right path? I think you're trying to make money and character walk together. That is rare. The next morning, Charles woke up early and decided to visit Brandon at the St. Vincent nursing home. He wanted to see how his son was adapting to his first day of volunteer work. The nursing home was in a simple neighborhood on the outskirts of New York. It was an old building, but clean and well kept. Sister Margaret greeted him at the entrance. Mr. Charles, how good to see you in person. Sister, how is my son? May I be honest? Please. He arrived yesterday afternoon full of goodwill, but completely lost. He had never changed a diaper, never bathed someone, never dealt with people with dementia. And how did he react? At first he was clearly uncomfortable, especially when he had to clean up a gentleman who had soiled himself during feeding. Did he complain? No. But I saw in his eyes that he was fighting disgust and discomfort. And today? Today he arrived earlier and asked to work with the most difficult patients. Most difficult how? We have some elderly with advanced Alzheimer's. They sometimes scream, sometimes become aggressive, sometimes don't recognize anyone. They are the ones who need the most patience and affection. Charles was impressed, and he specifically asked to work with them. He said he wants to learn to have patience with those who cannot return kindness. Sister Margaret took Charles on a tour of the nursing home. They passed through various areas: physical therapy rooms, dining hall, shared rooms, recreation room. It was in the recreation room that they found Brandon. He was sitting on the floor playing with a puzzle alongside a frail-looking elderly man. "Very good, Mr. Harold," Brandon was saying patiently. "This piece goes here. Yes, exactly." The elderly man smiled with each piece he managed to fit correctly. Brandon celebrated every small success as if it were a great victory. Charles observed the scene unnoticed. There was a genuine tenderness in his son's interaction with the elderly man. It didn't seem forced or fake. "Mr. Harold has dementia," Sister Margaret whispered. "Most people lose patience with him because he forgets things immediately after learning them." "And Brandon?" Brandon started the puzzle with him 3 times today, and each time he celebrated as if it were the first. Charles felt a strange emotion, pride mixed with surprise. Perhaps there was real hope for his son. At that moment, Brandon noticed his father's presence. "Dad," he said, quickly standing up, "I didn't know you were coming today. I came to see how you're adapting." "Well, I think so. It's different from anything I've ever done." "Different how?" "Here, nothing I achieved before matters. My degree, my car, my bank account, none of that makes a difference. What matters is if I have patience, if I can be kind, if I make people feel loved." "And do you think you have those qualities?" "I'm learning, Dad. Mr. Harold taught me something important today." "What?" "He forgets everything every 5 minutes, but in each of those 5 minutes he is completely present, completely grateful for any kindness. It made me realize how I was living on autopilot, without really paying attention to people." Charles was touched by his son's reflection. "Brandon, can I ask you a question?" "Of course, Dad. Last night, when you humiliated me, did you take pleasure in it?" Brandon lowered his head, ashamed. "I did, Dad. And that's what shames me the most. I truly took pleasure in feeling superior to someone I thought was inferior. And today? Today I understood that there is no inferior person. There are people in different situations, but everyone deserves dignity." Mr. Harold, the elderly man with dementia, tugged at Brandon's sleeve. "Young man, you're not leaving, are you?" he asked anxiously. "No, Mr. Harold. I'm going to stay here playing with you." "You're a good boy," the elderly man said affectionately. "My family never comes to visit me." Brandon swallowed hard. The reality that this man had been abandoned by his own family hit him strongly. "Mr. Harold, now you have a new family here, and I am part of it." The elderly man smiled and hugged Brandon tightly. Charles watched the scene with misty eyes. His son was truly learning compassion. "Sister Margaret," he whispered, "how long has it been since any family visited Mr. Harold?" 2 years, she replied sadly. "He has 3 adult children who live here in New York, but they never show up. And the other elderly residents? Most are in the same situation, families who prefer to pay to leave the elderly here than to visit them." Charles was impacted by the information. He himself had almost become one of those abandoned elderly, if not for the test he took at the party. "Sister, may I make a donation to improve the conditions of the nursing home?" "Mr. Mitchell, any help is welcome, but what they need most is not money." "What is it?" "Company. Someone to visit them, to talk with them, to make them feel they are still important." A brilliant idea came to Charles's mind. "Sister, what if I brought other volunteers? Employees from my company who want to dedicate a few hours a week to visit the elderly?" "That would be wonderful, but could you get people interested?" "I'm sure I could, especially if I incentivize them with work benefits." Brandon, who had overheard the conversation, approached. "Dad, can I make a suggestion?" "Of course. How about creating a program where each elderly person here gets adopted by a family of employees? Not a legal adoption, but an emotional one. They would visit regularly, participate in special occasions, make the elderly feel part of a family again. Brandon's idea impressed both Charles Mitchell and Sister Margaret. "Brandon, that's brilliant," said the father. "The idea came from Mr. Harold. When he said his family doesn't visit, I thought about how good it would be if he had a new family that cared." Sister Margaret clapped her hands. "You both have generous hearts. Let's implement this." Charles spent the rest of the morning at the nursing home, meeting other elderly residents and observing how Brandon interacted with each one. He saw a real transformation happening in his son. At lunchtime, Brandon was helping feed an elderly lady with Parkinson's who had difficulty holding utensils. "Take your time, Mrs. Dorothy," he said patiently. "No rush. Let's go at your pace." The lady, who appeared to be around 80, smiled as Brandon helped her with each spoonful. "You're an angel, my boy," she said in a trembling voice. "No, Mrs. Dorothy. The angel is you, teaching me patience." Charles realized it wasn't just friendliness. Brandon was genuinely learning from each interaction. When he said goodbye to the nursing home, Charles hugged his son. "Brandon, I'm proud of what I saw today. Dad, I'm still on the first day. I have a whole year ahead of me. And do you think you'll manage?" "I don't know if I'll manage, but I know I want to manage, and that's already different from yesterday." On the way back to the office, Charles called Tyler. "Tyler, how's your first day as special assistant going?" "Very well, sir. I've already identified 3 employees who deserve special recognition." "Tell me." "There's a cleaning lady, Mrs. Betty, who always helps colleagues with sick children. She stays beyond her hours to cover for absences without asking for anything in return." "Interesting. Who else?" "There's a security guard, Mr. Frank, who always shares his snack with employees who forgot to bring theirs from home. And there's a secretary, Jennifer, who organizes a collection every month to help colleagues with financial difficulties." "Tyler, you have an excellent eye for spotting kindness." "It's because I recognize it. I've needed people like that in my life." Charles smiled. He had chosen the right person to coordinate the program. "Tyler, I'm going to create special bonuses for these people, and I want you to identify more employees like them." "Sir, may I suggest something else?" "Of course." "How about we create a day at the company dedicated to volunteering? Employees could visit nursing homes, orphanages, hospitals." "Tyler, you're reading my mind. I just left the nursing home where my son is working and had exactly the same idea." "Really? What a coincidence." "It's not a coincidence, Tyler. It's synchronicity. When good people come together, ideas flow naturally." They spent the rest of the afternoon outlining the corporate volunteering program. Employees who participated would receive a half-day of paid leave per month for social activities. At the end of the day, Charles received an unexpected call. It was Elizabeth. "Charles, brother, I've thought a lot about our conversation yesterday. And have you reached a conclusion?" "I have. I accept doing the volunteer work." Charles was surprised. He didn't expect Elizabeth to accept. "Are you sure, Elizabeth?" "I am. I want to prove I'm capable of being a better person." "Where do you want to work?" "I thought about a daycare for underprivileged children. I've always liked children." "Elizabeth, volunteer work isn't child's play. You'll be changing diapers, cleaning up vomit, dealing with crying children." "I know, Charles. I'm prepared." Charles doubted if she really understood what she was proposing to do. "Elizabeth, can I ask you a question?" "Of course. Why did you change your mind? Yesterday you thought the proposal was excessive." "Because I spent the whole night thinking about how I treated you, how I treated that man in the wheelchair, not knowing it was you, and I realized I don't like the person I've become." "Go on." "Charles, for years I envied your success, your money, your recognition, but I never envied your kindness. And yesterday I realized that kindness is more important than all of that." "Elizabeth, do you really want to do this, or are you doing it out of pressure?" "Brother, I'll be honest. At first it was pressure. But after reflecting, I realized I need to do this for myself." Charles was touched by his sister's honesty. "All right, Elizabeth, I'll help you find a suitable institution." "Thank you, brother. And Charles—" "Yes?" "Will you forgive me for everything I said and did? Elizabeth, forgiveness is built with actions, not words. But I'm happy you want to try." After the call, Charles reflected on the changes that were happening. In just 2 days, both Brandon and Elizabeth had decided to accept the volunteer work challenge. The next morning, Charles had lunch with Tyler and his mother, Mrs. Linda, at a simple but welcoming steakhouse. Mrs. Linda was a woman of about 50, with graying hair, kind eyes, and a smile that lit up her face. Despite diabetes and high blood pressure, she radiated a contagious joy. "Mr. Charles," she said emotionally, "I don't know how to thank you for everything you're doing for my Tyler." "Mrs. Linda, I'm the one who should be thankful. Your son showed me that kindness still exists in the world. He's always been like that since he was little. When his father abandoned us, Tyler was only 15, but he took on the responsibilities like a man." "Tell me more about that." "Tyler's father left home to live with another woman. He left us with nothing. Tyler stopped studying to work and support me." "And how did he manage to study later?" "He studied at night, worked during the day. It took him 6 years to finish high school, but he finished. He always said he was going to give me a better life." Charles looked at Tyler with even more admiration. "Tyler, you didn't tell me you stopped studying to take care of your mother." "Sir, I didn't want you to think I was telling a sob story to get pity." "Tyler, that's not a sob story. It's proof of character," Mrs. Linda continued. "Mr. Charles, when Tyler came home yesterday talking about the job, I cried with happiness. Not for the better conditions, but to see that finally someone recognized my son's worth." "Mrs. Linda, may I ask a question?" "Of course, sir." "How did you teach Tyler so much kindness?" "I didn't teach him, sir. Life taught him. When you go through need, you learn to value any help you receive. And when you receive help, you learn to help others." "Did you receive help from anyone when your husband abandoned you?" "Yes, I did. From a neighbor, Mrs. Ruth. She had even less than us, but she always shared what she had. When I didn't have money for medicine, she would lend it to me. When Tyler was sick and I needed to work, she took care of him." "And where is Mrs. Ruth today?" "She passed away 2 years ago, but before she left I promised her I would pay forward all the kindness she taught me." Charles was moved by the story. "And Tyler witnessed all this?" "He witnessed and participated. Since he was 8, he helped me take care of Mrs. Ruth when she got sick. That's how he learned to have compassion for others." The story perfectly explained why Tyler had been kind to a stranger in a wheelchair. He had been raised to see need and respond with compassion. "Mrs. Linda, you raised an extraordinary son. Mr. Charles, Tyler tells me he's now going to coordinate social projects at your company." "That's right. May I give you some advice?" "Of course. When helping people, don't forget to ask what they really need. Sometimes we think we know, but people need different things than we imagine." "How so?" "For example, when Tyler was little and we were going through a hard time, people always offered food. It was important, of course, but what I needed most was someone to talk to me, to tell me that I was going to get through that phase." "I understand. You needed emotional support, not just material." "Exactly. Human beings need to feel valuable. They need to have hope. Sometimes that's more important than money." Tyler added, "That's why yesterday at the nursing home with your son, I realized the elderly didn't just need medical care. They needed to feel that someone cared about them." "You both have a wisdom that comes from experience," said Charles. "I'll take this advice to all our social programs." After lunch, back at the office, Charles received a call from Sister Margaret. "Mr. Charles, I have news about your son." "Good or bad?" "Excellent. This morning something very special happened." "Tell me." "Mr. Harold, the gentleman with dementia, had an anxiety attack. He started yelling that he wanted to leave, that no one cared about him. Usually these episodes last for hours." "And what happened?" "Brandon sat on the floor next to him, held his hand, and started telling stories from his childhood. Stories about his father, about games, about happy moments." "And it worked?" "It worked perfectly. Mr. Harold calmed down in a few minutes. Then he fell asleep holding Brandon's hand. How did Brandon know which stories to tell? He explained to me afterward. He said he realized Mr. Harold was feeling lonely and abandoned, so he wanted to make him remember he was once loved." Charles was deeply moved. "Sister, My son is really changing, isn't he? Mr. Charles, in 40 years of working with the elderly, I have rarely seen someone develop so much affection and patience so quickly. Brandon has a natural gift for caring for people. He always did. I just didn't know how to cultivate that side of him. It's never too late to cultivate kindness, Mr. Charles. That afternoon, Charles decided to visit Elizabeth, who had started her volunteer work at a daycare in the South Bronx neighborhood in the southern zone of New York. The Little Angels daycare served about 60 children from families in socially vulnerable situations. The building was simple but colorful, with children's drawings on the walls and a small playground in the yard. Miss Rebecca, the daycare coordinator, greeted him. "Mr. Charles, so nice to meet you. Your sister arrived this morning and is already causing a positive revolution here." "How so?" "She brought art materials she bought with her own money, paint, paper, crayons, Play-Doh. The children are loving it." "And her? How is she adapting?" "To be honest, at first she seemed a bit lost, but when she saw the children's enthusiasm, she completely relaxed." Miss Rebecca took Charles to the room where Elizabeth was working. She was sitting on the floor, surrounded by 5 children, aged 3 to 4, all painting colorful pictures. "Miss Elizabeth, look at my drawing," said a girl, showing a paper full of green scribbles. "How beautiful, Emma. Is it a tree?" "It's my grandma's tree. She has one just like it in the backyard." Elizabeth was smiling genuinely, helping each child with their drawings. Charles noticed a lightness in her expression that he hadn't seen in years. One of the children noticed Charles's presence. "Miss Elizabeth, who is that man?" Elizabeth looked at the door and saw her brother. For a moment she was embarrassed, as if caught doing something intimate. "He's my brother, children. His name is Charles." "Hi, Uncle Charles!" the children shouted in chorus. Charles approached and sat on the floor next to the group. "Hi, everyone. Are you making drawings?" "We are. Aunt Elizabeth is teaching us how to paint." "And do you guys like Aunt Elizabeth?" "She's cool," said one boy. "She doesn't get mad when we get paint on ourselves." Elizabeth blushed slightly at the comment. "Children," she said, "how about you show your drawings to Uncle Charles?" For the next 20 minutes, Charles was introduced to dozens of works of children's art. Each child proudly explained their drawing, and he listened with genuine attention. When the children went for a snack, Elizabeth and Charles were left alone in the room. "Brother, I didn't expect to see you here today," she said, wiping paint off her hands. "I wanted to see how you were adjusting." "Honestly, better than I expected." "How so?" "Charles, when I arrived here this morning, I was nervous, not knowing what to do. But when I saw these children so starved for attention, everything felt natural." "Natural how?" "They just want someone to pay attention to them, to listen to their stories, to value their drawings. It's that simple." "And are you managing to give them that?" "I'm trying. And you know what's strange? I'm receiving more than I'm giving." "How so?" "These children look at me as if I were special just for being here, not because of my money or status, just for being present." Charles was moved by his sister's reflection. "Elizabeth, you seem more light." "I feel lighter, you know why?" "Why?" "Because for the first time in years I'm doing something that really matters. I'm making a difference in the lives of people who really need it." "And how does that make you feel?" "Useful, important, not for what I have, but for what I do." Miss Rebecca approached. "Mr. Charles, your sister has a natural way with children. They've already become attached to her." "Is that so?" "Just look," said Miss Rebecca, pointing to the window. In the courtyard, several children were running after Elizabeth, who was playing tag with them. She was laughing like a child, completely unconcerned with her dirty clothes or messy hair. "I've never seen your sister like this," commented Charles. "Like what?" "So spontaneous, so simply happy." Working with children has that effect. They teach us to rediscover simple joys. Charles watched Elizabeth playing with the children and realized she was truly changing. The calculating, self-interested woman who had humiliated a man in a wheelchair was giving way to someone more genuine. When Elizabeth came back inside, out of breath but smiling, Charles commented, "You seem like a different person." "I feel like a different person. Charles, can I confess something?" "Of course." When you proposed this volunteer work, I accepted just so I wouldn't lose our relationship. But now I want to continue even after the mandatory year. Really? Really? These children have made me remember who I was before I got lost in appearances and status. Who were you? A person who dreamed of making a difference in the world. I don't know when I stopped dreaming about that. Charles hugged his sister, moved. Elizabeth, I'm proud of you. Thank you, brother. And thank you for forcing me to see who I had become. On the way back home, Charles reflected on the transformations he was witnessing. In just 3 days, both Brandon and Elizabeth were showing genuine changes. That night, he received an unexpected call from Jessica. Mr. Charles, good evening. I hope I'm not bothering you. Not at all, Jessica. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Sir, I wanted to tell you something. I visited Brandon today at the nursing home. Charles was surprised. You visited? I thought you two weren't speaking. We really weren't, but I felt the need to see him working to understand if the change is real. And what did you think? Mr. Charles, it was moving. I saw Brandon feeding an elderly man with Alzheimer's, with infinite patience. The man spat food on him 3 times, and Brandon just cleaned up and started over, always with kindness. How did you feel seeing that? Confused, happy, hopeful. The man I saw there wasn't the same one who embarrassed me at the party. Jessica, can I give you some advice? Of course, sir. Don't rush into making decisions about the two of you. Let time show if Brandon's change is lasting. That's exactly what I intend to do. But Mr. Charles, can I confess something? What? I still love him. And seeing him caring for those people with so much affection rekindled my hope. Jessica, true love has that strength. It survives mistakes and grows stronger with positive changes. Do you think Brandon has really changed? I think he is changing, and that's already a lot. After the conversation with Jessica, Charles felt even more hopeful. Perhaps his family really could be rebuilt on more solid foundations. The following week, Charles implemented the corporate volunteering program at his company. The response was surprising. More than 200 employees signed up to participate. Tyler coordinated the activities with an efficiency that impressed everyone. He had created partnerships with nursing homes, orphanages, hospitals, and rehabilitation centers throughout the city. Mr. Charles, reported Tyler in a meeting, the employees are loving the program. Many said they had never felt so fulfilled at work. Why do you think that is? Because they discovered they can use their professional skills to help people who really need it. How so? For example, employees from the financial sector are teaching financial literacy to underprivileged youth. Those from IT are giving computer classes to the elderly. Each one is contributing with what they know how to do best. That's brilliant, Tyler. Was it your idea? Actually, it was the employees' own. They started suggesting ways to use their skills for social good. Charles was moved by the report. The program had become something much bigger than he had initially imagined. And what's the return for the company like? Incredible, sir. Productivity has increased. The work environment has improved, and we've received several new employees who came to work here specifically because of the social programs. Do you think people work better when they feel socially useful? Absolutely, sir. When you know your company cares about social good, you take more pride in working there. A month after Brandon and Elizabeth's volunteer work began, Charles decided to pay a surprise visit to the nursing home. Arriving there, he found a scene that moved him deeply. Brandon was organizing a birthday party for Mr. Harold, the elderly man with dementia. There was cake, balloons, music, and several other elderly residents participating. "Happy birthday, Mr. Harold." Everyone sang with Brandon conducting the chorus. The elderly man, even without fully understanding what was happening, smiled radiantly with all that attention. "How old am I turning again?" asked Mr. Harold. 85, Mr. Harold," Brandon replied cheerfully. "Wow, what an age," laughed the elderly man. "And you threw a party just for me. Of course, you are special to all of us." Charles noticed other volunteers were helping with the party. He recognized some as employees from his company. Sister Margaret approached. "Your son organized all this. He found out today was Mr. Harold's birthday and decided to celebrate." "Who are the other volunteers?" "Employees from your company. Brandon asked them to come today especially for the party." "And they came?" "They came and brought gifts. Each one brought something special for Mr. Harold." Charles saw Mr. Harold opening simple but thoughtfully chosen gifts: a new puzzle, a comfortable shirt, chocolates, a small radio to listen to music. "Look how many friends I have," the elderly man said with each gift he opened. Brandon approached his father. "Dad, I didn't know you were coming today. I came to see how the birthday party was going." "You knew about the party?" "Sister Margaret told me. It was a great idea." "Dad, can I tell you something I learned?" "Of course." "Mr. Harold taught me that the most valuable gift doesn't cost money." "What gift is that?" "Making someone feel remembered on their birthday. He didn't even remember today was his birthday until I told him. But when he saw the party, he started crying with happiness." "Why did he cry?" "Because he realized someone cared enough to remember and celebrate." Charles hugged his son, proud of the sensitivity he was developing. "Brandon, you're becoming the man I always dreamed you'd be." "Dad, I still have a lot to learn, but for the first time in my life I feel like I'm on the right path." At that moment, Mr. Harold approached them. "Young man," he said to Charles, "do you know my son Brandon?" Charles looked at Brandon with surprise. The elderly man had adopted his son as family. "Yes, I do, Mr. Harold. He's a very special young man." "He's an angel," said the elderly man affectionately. "He takes care of me as if he were my own son." "And you like him?" "I like him very much. He's patient with me, even when I forget things. He never gets angry, never treats me badly." Brandon was moved by the old man's words. "Mr. Harold, you're also special to me." "I am?" "Yes. You teach me every day to be a better person." "How can I teach anything? I forget everything. You teach me that what matters isn't what we remember, but how we treat people in each moment." The party continued all afternoon. Charles watched the interactions and realized Brandon had found his true calling: caring for people. 2 weeks later, Charles visited Elizabeth at the daycare. He found an equally touching scene. Elizabeth was telling a story to a group of children, but one little girl, 4-year-old Sophia, was crying in the corner of the room. "Children, keep listening to the story with Miss Rebecca," said Elizabeth. "I'm going to talk to Sophia." She approached the girl and sat down beside her. "What happened, sweetheart?" "I miss my mum," sobbed the girl. "Your mum is at work, right? But she'll come pick you up soon." "She's not coming," cried Sophia. "She's gone." Elizabeth felt her heart tighten. The girl had been abandoned by her mother and was being cared for by an elderly grandmother who worked all day. "Sophia, do you want me to tell you a secret?" The girl nodded. "Sometimes mummies have to go away, but that doesn't mean they don't love us." "No?" "No. Sometimes they go away because they're confused or sad or have problems they can't solve." "But I want my mum. I know, sweetheart, and it's okay to miss her. But look how many people here love you. Grandma loves you, Miss Rebecca loves you, I love you." "Do you really love me, Aunt Elizabeth?" "I love you very much. You're a very special girl." Sophia hugged Elizabeth, who returned the affection tenderly. Charles watched the scene from the doorway, deeply moved. His sister was showing a maternal sensitivity he didn't know she possessed. Miss Rebecca approached him. "Sophia has been like this since she arrived here 2 weeks ago. Elizabeth is the only one who can comfort her." "Why do you think Elizabeth has this connection with her?" "I think Elizabeth recognizes the pain of abandonment, and she can speak about it with real understanding." Charles understood. Elizabeth had also felt emotionally abandoned by their father when they were children. She knew what it was like to lack affection. "Your sister has a gift," continued Miss Rebecca. "The neediest children are naturally drawn to her." "How so?" "We have several children here who were rejected or abandoned by their families. All of them choose Elizabeth as their emotional anchor." "And does she respond to them?" "More than responds." She makes a point of giving individual attention to each of them. Charles spent the rest of the afternoon observing Elizabeth work. She had infinite patience with the most difficult children, special affection for the neediest, and inexhaustible energy to play and teach. When the children left at the end of the day, Elizabeth sat down, exhausted, but smiling. "It was a busy day," commented Charles. "It was, but it was wonderful." Sophia managed to stop crying and even played a little. "Elizabeth, can I ask a personal question?" "Of course. Why are you so good with abandoned children?" Elizabeth paused, thoughtful. "Because I know what it feels like to be abandoned." "Abandoned how?" "Charles, when we were children, Dad was very absent, always traveling, always busy with business. I felt invisible to him." "And that marked you?" "Deeply. I spent my whole life trying to get attention, trying to be important, but I could never feel truly loved." "And these children?" "These children make me feel important in the right way. Not because I have money or status, but because I can offer the affection they need." "And does that make you happy?" "It makes me whole. For the first time in my life, I feel like I'm using my experience of pain to help other people." Charles hugged his sister, recognizing the depth of her transformation. "Elizabeth, you've become the person you always had the potential to be. Thank you for giving me this opportunity, brother. Thank you for having the courage to take the opportunity." 3 months after the volunteer work began, Charles called a family meeting. He invited Brandon, Elizabeth, and Jessica to dinner at his house. It was the first time they had gathered since the fateful engagement party. Mrs. Martha prepared a special dinner, and everyone sat at the table with a mixture of expectation and nervousness. "Well," began Charles, "I think it's time we took stock of these 3 months." Brandon spoke first. "Dad, these have been the 3 most challenging and rewarding months of my life. I've learned more about myself and about life than in all the previous years." "What specifically have you learned?" "I learned that true wealth isn't in what we have, but in what we can give. I learned that patience is the most important virtue of all, and I learned that unconditional love exists." "Unconditional love?" "From the elderly I care for. They love me simply because I'm present, because I care. They don't ask about my bank account, my degrees, my cars. They just thank me for being there." Elizabeth added, "Charles, I also discovered things about myself I didn't know existed. I discovered I have the capacity to love without expecting anything in return." "How so?" "The children I care for can't give me anything material. They can't elevate my social status. They can't help me network. But the love I feel for them is the purest I've ever experienced." Jessica, who had been listening, asked to speak. "Mr. Charles, may I give my perspective as an outside observer?" "Of course, Jessica." "In 3 months, I've seen Brandon transform completely. The arrogant, cruel man I met at the party no longer exists. And what is the Brandon of today like? Kind, patient, humble, someone who genuinely cares about the well-being of other people." Brandon looked at Jessica with hope. "Jessica, does that mean you forgive me? It means I'm in love with the man you've become. And does that mean? It means I accept marrying you, but on one condition." "What?" "That we continue to be involved in social work for the rest of our lives. I don't want to go back to the superficial life we led before." Brandon stood up and hugged Jessica, emotional. "I accept. More than accept, I insist." Charles watched the scene with joy. His family was being rebuilt, but now on solid foundations. "Well," he said, "I think the time has come for us to make some important decisions." "What kind of decisions, Father?" "First, you two have completed only 3 months of the year we had agreed upon. Do you want to continue?" "Yes," Brandon and Elizabeth answered in unison. "Why?" Brandon responded, "Because I'm still learning, and because those people need me as much as I need them." Elizabeth added, "Because for the first time in my life, I've found my purpose. Those children taught me what true love is." "Perfect," said Charles, smiling. "Second decision. How about we expand our social programs?" "How so?" asked Elizabeth. "How about we create a family foundation? You would coordinate large-scale social projects, using our resources to make a real difference in the lives of thousands of people. Brandon's eyes lit up. Father, that would be incredible. We could create model nursing homes, quality daycares, professional training programs, and psychological support programs, Elizabeth completed. Many of the children I care for need specialized follow-up. Jessica got excited. And we could create financial education programs for low-income families. Charles smiled, seeing everyone's enthusiasm. Then it's decided. We'll create the Mitchell Foundation for Social Development. And who will chair the foundation? Asked Brandon. You two together. Brandon as president, Elizabeth as vice president. Father, I don't have the experience to chair a foundation, protested Brandon. Brandon, you have the most important experience. You know what truly matters in life. The rest you'll learn. Elizabeth asked. And you, Charles, what will your role be? I'll be the advisor. You execute, I guide and support. And financially? Asked Brandon. I will donate 60% of the estate to the foundation. You will have sufficient resources to make real changes in society. Everyone fell silent, absorbing the magnitude of the proposal. Father, Brandon finally said, does this mean you trust us? It means you have proven you deserve trust, and that I am now certain my legacy will be in good hands. And the remainder of the estate? Asked Elizabeth. It will be divided between the two of you, but on one condition. It must be used to further expand the social work. Charles, Elizabeth said emotionally, you are creating a legacy of love, not just money. That is exactly what I want. Money runs out. Love multiplies. Jessica asked to speak. Mr. Charles, may I propose something? Of course. How about we include Tyler in the foundation? He has a very special vision regarding social work. Excellent idea. Tyler will be our general project coordinator. The conversation continued into the early morning, planning the details of the foundation. Everyone was excited about the possibilities that were opening up. 6 months later, the Mitchell Foundation for Social Development was officially launched. The ceremony took place at the St. Vincent nursing home itself, with all the elderly people Brandon cared for in attendance. Mr. Harold, even with his dementia, was the guest of honor. He didn't fully understand what was happening, but he felt the joy in the air. Is today a party? He asked Brandon. Yes, it is, Mr. Harold. A very special party. And can I join? Of course. You are the most important guest. The children from the daycare where Elizabeth worked were also invited. They presented drawings and songs for the elderly, creating an emotional intergenerational gathering. Sophia, the girl Elizabeth had comforted on the first day, climbed onto the makeshift stage. I want to thank Aunt Elizabeth for teaching me that true love exists. Elizabeth cried with emotion, as did everyone present. Tyler, now the foundation's general coordinator, presented the first projects. We are going to build 3 new nursing homes with a standard of excellence, 5 new daycare centers in underserved communities, and create a professional training program for young people. Charles observed everything with a heart full of pride. His family had transformed from a group of self-interested people into a team dedicated to social good. Dr. Stephen, the family doctor, approached him. Charles, you've achieved something rare. You turned pain into growth. How so, Doctor? The humiliation you went through at that party could have bred resentment and revenge, but you turned it into an opportunity for change. Doctor, I learned that the worst experiences can teach us the best lessons. And what was the best lesson? That true love is built with actions, not with words or money. 2 years later, the Mitchell Foundation had become a national reference in social work. Its projects directly benefited over 10,000 people and another 50,000 indirectly. Brandon had become a recognized specialist in elderly care. He wrote a book on dignity in old age that became a bestseller. Elizabeth developed an innovative methodology for caring for abandoned children, which was adopted by institutions across the country. Jessica and Brandon married in a simple ceremony at the St. Vincent nursing home, with their elderly residents participating as chosen family. Tyler graduated in social work, funded by the foundation, and became one of the most respected social project coordinators in the country. Mrs. Linda, Tyler's mother, was hired as the foundation's special care coordinator, using her life experience to guide other mothers in difficulty. Mrs. Martha received a dignified pension and chose to continue working part-time, coordinating the caregiver training program. And Charles. He divided his time between guiding the foundation's projects and regularly returning to the nursing home to talk with his Mr. Harold and other elderly residents. One Sunday afternoon, 3 years after the fateful engagement party, Charles was at the nursing home talking with Mr. Harold when the old man asked a question that surprised him. "Young man, do you remember when you first arrived here?" "I remember, Mr. Harold. You were sad that day, weren't you?" Charles was surprised. It was rare for Mr. Harold to have moments of clarity that connected distant periods. "I was, yes, very sad. And now?" "Now I am happy." "Why did you become happy?" "Because I found a real family. Here at the nursing home. Here and in many places. People who love me for who I am, not for what I have." Mr. Harold smiled. "It's good to have a real family, isn't it?" "It's the most important thing in the world, Mr. Harold. And do you know the secret to having a real family? What is it? To love without wanting anything in return." The simple wisdom of the old man with dementia touched Charles deeply. That was exactly what he had learned on his journey. That night, having dinner with his new family, Brandon, Elizabeth, Jessica, Tyler, and their respective families, Charles reflected on everything that had happened. The engagement party that should have been a celebration had become the starting point for the greatest transformation of their lives. He had discovered that wealth without character is poverty, that a family based on interest is not a family, that true love is built every day through kind actions. But mainly he had discovered that it's never too late to start over, that people can genuinely change, and that the greatest legacy someone can leave is not material possessions, but transformed lives. "Dad," said Brandon during dinner, "can I ask a question?" "Of course." "Do you regret having done that test at the party?" Charles thought for a moment. "I don't regret it. It was painful, but necessary." "Why necessary?" "Because it showed me the truth. And the truth, even if painful, is always preferable to illusion, even if comfortable." Elizabeth added, "And it gave us the opportunity to become better people." "Exactly. If I hadn't discovered who you really were that night, we would never have had the chance to grow together." Jessica raised her glass. "So let's toast to the truth, even when it hurts." Everyone raised their glasses. "To the truth," Tyler added, "and to the kindness born from pain transformed into love." "To kindness," Mrs. Linda, who had been invited to dinner, made her contribution, "and to second chances, because everyone deserves an opportunity to start over." "To second chances," Charles Mitchell looked around the table, seeing happy faces, genuine smiles, eyes shining with hope and purpose. It had started with a broken family, based on interest and falsehood. Now he had a true family, built on solid foundations of love, compassion, and common purpose. The journey had been painful, but transformative. And best of all, it was just beginning. End of story. Now we want to know your opinion on this transformative story. What did you think of Charles and his family's journey? Do you believe people can genuinely change when confronted with their own attitudes? Have you ever experienced a situation where you discovered that true love reveals itself in the small actions of everyday life? Share your reflections and experiences with us in the comments. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to leave your like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories about transformation, family, and the strength of true love. Your participation is very important to us.